Everybody, Jeff Miller here from Target Test Prep. Excited to talk to you today about how to prepare for the quant section of the GMAT, how to get as high score as possible. We're talking about a Q90, but in reality, what I hope everybody can walk away from today is how to do really well in GMAT Quant. Whether you're going through Q90 or not, there's certainly a lot of things that you can take away from everything that I'm teaching you guys here today. So what I was talking to the student about is he wanted to be done with his GMAT by May, and he had no idea where he was starting from. Now that's a problem, right? We don't ever want to be in a situation where we're creating a timeline that just isn't going to be realistic, right? So what we need to do is we need to get to a place where we have that baseline score. But you don't jump in with 2 feet without actually understanding what's tested on the GMAT. So that's steps 1 and 2. Learn what's on the GMAT, learn what's tested, learn how it's tested, and then do some practice questions based on that, right? So do some data sufficiency, do some data insight stuff, 2-part analysis, graphic interpretation. How is the quant tested? What's going on with critical reasoning and reading comp? Get that down, take the practice test. Now take an official one. You might think you're wasting it, you're not. Remember, there's 6 total practice exams, but each one can be repeated one time, sometimes more than once, but I usually say it's safer to repeat it once. So you really have 12 tests, you have a ton. And then after that, you have your score, you compare it to your target score, and then you're off to the races, but you need to get the right study materials in place, and that's going to be thinking about how you learn best. Are you looking for live classes? Are you looking for private tutoring? Are you looking for self-study classes, self-study courses, all of which we offer, by the way, at TTP. Like, we do have a ton of different ways to teach our students. And you go from there. Now, the study schedule is a little bit different because once you have your materials in place, those materials might have a study plan, but what you need to do is focus on your study schedule. And that is, when am I going to be studying every day, every week? Now, you may say, well, I'll figure it out on the fly. People try that. It doesn't necessarily work out well for them because you're really fitting GMAT stuff into the rest of your life, right? So it's not just going to come naturally. If you're working full time, you have a family, you have other things you do outside of work, this is going to start last on your list, but it's got to creep up. You're going to have to remove other things from your life. Make sure you have the time for GMAT. So the deal is just create a study schedule for yourself. That's the best way to deal with this. And then you don't have to overthink the process. You say when you're going to be studying, and you just make sure you do it. I can't stress how important that is because I've seen too many people go into this process, not realize what it's going to take going into this process for them to be successful, and just kind of petering out after 3-4 months because it's just too much for them to handle. Next, how to excel at math on the GMAT. So there's a lot of different ways to excel in math. From the X's and O's standpoints of learning the content, like that stuff is, that stuff is pretty obvious. You have to learn about quadratic equations, you have to learn about rates, you have to learn about work, et cetera, et cetera. But what about like the mental stuff? Okay, like there's some big things that you can be doing. Eliminate negative self-talk, for example. Well, is learning GMAT Quant going to be difficult? Yes. But is it something that you're just going to have to be able to get through? Yes. So on your bad days, if you're being negative and saying, well, this isn't worth it, or I can't learn it, like that's not going to help you. So you need to take any negative or discomfort, which you see in step 3, and turn that into a positive, right? And the way to do that is to recognize that, hey, discomfort is growth. If you're uncomfortable, that means you've hit a point where you have to learn something and learn it new. That's going to happen all the time when you're dealing with GMAT Quant. So get used to that feeling and embrace the feeling. And if you can do that, it's going to help tremendously with your development as far as GMAT Quant is concerned. And then going back to step 2, well, this goes for anything in life. your goal needs to be to outwork the competition, right? Because the harder you work more than the people next to you, the better your outcome should be, assuming that you're also, studying smart, doing things the right way, but working hard and working harder than the person to the left of you and to the right of you is really, really important. So keep that in mind in general. And that's, again, some of these are life lessons. Not being negative, that same way in life, outworking the competition, same way in life, and even recognizing discomfort and growth. These are things that we need to embrace in life as well. All right, talking about timing strategies, because this is really important. Now, one thing I will say regarding these sections here, and this goes beyond just quant, you have to make sure you finish a section. You never want to be in a place where a question is left blank. You can't do that. You don't want to do that. It's just not, it's going to be very detrimental for your score. So I don't care if you have 2 questions in 20 seconds, get the answers in. But hopefully we're not going to be in that position. So we got to think about ways to counteract being in that place. And we really want to, make sure that we're doing things right as we progress through a section. So what do some of these things mean? Well, striving for excellent, not perfection. Well, what does that mean? Well, yeah, I know we're talking about a Q90 quant score. So in that case, you want to get as close to perfection as possible. But let's just say you want to get a really, really good quant score. Well, you want to be great, but you don't need to be perfect. And the drive to be perfect could mess you up on a section. Let's say you're up to question 10 and things have been going great. Well, if on question 10 you decide that you're going to go all in on that question because there's something that you don't understand and you spend 7 minutes on it, messing up the rest of the quant section, that's going to be a problem. So make sure you're not in that position. And the same goes for over-investing in the first X number of questions. Yes, in an ideal world, we don't want to get the first 3 questions wrong, but that goes without saying, but it doesn't mean you want to get the last 4 wrong because you got the first 3 right. So you need to be really, really careful with how you counteract your desire to not start off on a bad foot with messing things up for the rest of the section. But remember, if you're at your peak performance level when you get to the GMAT, a lot of these things shouldn't happen anyway. And you should be in a position to successfully deal with these questions and not have to overthink how you deal with the first 5 or how you play catch up on the back end of the test. And that's the same thing with losing a battle to help win the war. Well, what does that mean? Well, it means that you're willing to give up on questions if you have to make sure that the entire section in totality is successful. Because again, you go back to my example, if you're on question 10 and you decide, well, this battle I'm not going to lose, you spend 7-8 minutes on it, even if you get it right, you really mess yourself up for the rest of the section. So try not to do that. Randomly throwing away questions, also not a good idea. A lot of people do that to make it so the timing works out as it needs to. That's not helpful, because if you just throw away a question, then what happens? Well, that could be an easy question. And if it's an easy question, it'll mess up your score. So at least give it 30 to 45 seconds, but also understand where you're weak. Understand which questions make the most sense for you to be giving up on going into the test. Because if you know where you're weak and you need to catch up on time, and a question pops up on the screen that's from your weak area, you may give it 30 seconds and say, yeah, I know I'm not getting this. But then you do guess and move on. You could maybe come back to it later if you have time. But that means you're not doing it randomly, and that means you're being more strategic in guessing than if you would just randomly guess. And I said this before, you got to answer every question. If you don't, your score is going to get hurt very, very bad. It's about 20 points off every time you leave something blank. So just make sure you never do that. So how do you master word problems? Okay, well, here's the thing with word problems. They are a vast part of the GMAT. A lot of people, when they think of word problems, they think of, okay, Bob is 5 years older than Frank. In 5 years, Bob will be 3 times as old as Frank. How old is Bob today? That's a general word problem where you're doing a lot of basic translations. But then you've got word problems in the realm of rates, in work, in ratios, in percent, in overlapping sets, in statistics, even combinations and permutations, and probability. Those are all word problems. So my suggestion on those is learning them individually and don't try to couple them together as one bulk item, right? So you need to make sure that you just first learn general word problems, which might consist of things like age problems or profit or interest or growth problems. Get those down, and we'll be talking about this throughout the presentation, but this comes down to topical learning and practice, and then rinse and repeat with rates. Learn all you can about rates, average rates, converging rates, diverging, catch up and pass, etc. Move on to work. But remember, while you're learning, you take your notes, you make your flashcards, you practice a ton on each, topical set of questions, and then you continue to move forward from there. So just keep that in mind as you're learning. And this goes for all of the GMAT, but that was to answer your specific word problem question. Other question was, if I have my GMAT in a month, any tips? Well, it depends on where you're at in your prep. If you're just starting out and you need to take this thing in a month, the suggestion is, well, crap, you might not have enough time, if I'm being totally honest. But if you're well into your prep, you're in the practice test phase of your prep, then yeah, I think that you should just continue taking practice tests. Use everything you're doing in those practice tests as data points where you're seeing why you're getting something wrong, perhaps going back to your prep materials to make fixes based on any gaps that you're seeing, so on and so forth. That's how you deal with, when you're getting closer and closer to test day. For people that target test prep in our practice test phase, we're having them do custom tests in our course. They're doing a random mix of different questions. In addition, we have these like weakness review tests that are based on their analytics and their data. So hopefully you can do something similar based on the resources that you're using. How to identify the point of diminishing returns? Okay, well, all right, so here's the deal. There can be diminishing returns depending on how you're structuring your prep. I mean, if you're studying an hour a day for a year, then yeah, there's probably going to be diminishing returns. But if you're studying 2 hours a day, more on the weekends, 18 hours a week, and you're studying because you still need to learn the material, that's not diminishing returns. That's just, this is how long you need to study. So unless you've gotten to the finish line and you've run through it, then I don't think there's a situation where you have to, worry too much about those diminishing returns. Hopefully you're studying the right way, doing the right things, and, you're in a position where you're going back, doing the review you need, so on and so forth. If you can do that, you'll be in good shape. But it's tough for me without knowing much about your situation to say whether or not there's diminishing returns. So yeah, it really depends on what's going on specifically with you and how you've been studying up to this point. But try not to go beyond the marker of when you should be done. All right, so more timing strategies. Checking your work is not possible. Anyone who I've heard who has checked their work, it's always been a bad end result because they've wasted time doing it and they've had to guess on the end. Internal clock is huge. Progress clock is huge. Basically knowing, hey, when am I at that 2-minute marker? When should I be thinking about jumping out of this question? But that only works when you know where you're at within the question. So you can kind of practice with it, with a stopwatch, with your iPhone, whatever it is, figuring out when it feels like 2 minutes has been up, so you can kind of lean on that on your test. As far as how you deal with timing, there's different ways to do it. We have some great blogs on it. One way is just to see how much time is left on the clock. Look at the number of questions you have left, multiply by 2, and then see if that matches up. If it doesn't, if you're behind the clock, you'll know. If you're ahead of the clock, you'll know, and then be strategic. I've heard some people were like, oh, I finished with 5 minutes left on the test. Obviously, you never want that to be you. So you don't want to get to the end of the test and realize you have 5 minutes to spare. Yeah, you can go back and fix some questions, but I'd rather you spend the necessary time on the questions in real time while you're dealing with that section, as opposed to going back and trying to make fixes or whatever. So get a strategy down. You've got tons of practice tests you can employ that strategy with, and then kind of go from there. And if you can do that, you'll be in great shape. All right, more strategies here. Well, you want to build a strong foundation. You want to be in a position where you're embracing your weaknesses. You care about algebra. These are the big things that I want to talk about right now. Careless mistakes we'll talk about in a second. But so here's the importance of all of this. Why do we build a strong foundation, right? Well, if your foundation isn't strong and the way that you operate is you jump into your prep and you're like, well, I'm just going to do a bunch of random questions and that's going to be how I deal with the GMAT, and I'll just learn because I'm learning by looking at solutions. It's never going to work. If you don't spend time on your foundation or your core principles and concepts leading into the rest of your prep, it's going to be a slog getting through the GMAT. And you're probably not going to be honest. Now, there's the idea of macro foundations and micro. The macro is, well, when you first start out, learn things like algebra as a whole, right? Learn about fraction rules and decimal rules and how to set up a percent. Get those down because they're applicable to many different things that you're studying throughout your quant prep, right? And the reason why I mentioned algebra is because algebra takes up such a big role in so many different topics. Someone asked about word problems earlier, and I listed off, 8 different chapters where we teach word problems. Well, within each one of those, algebra is important, but that's just in word problems. Algebra is important in quadratics. It can be important in number properties. It can be important in exponents. So you have to make sure that you get that down in general. Now, the micro is every time you learn a new topic, start with the basics. If you're starting with quadratic equations, the first thing you want to learn about is how to FOIL and what factoring is, factoring down, right? Before you get into more complicated stuff like difference of squares and how to use the difference of squares to solve a large array of questions. Those are really, really important things. Those are things that should structure your prep. It's what we do in target test prep. Every time you get to a chapter, the basics are at the beginning of it, and then you build your way up, and it's about how those basics are used in more advanced questions. Because sometimes an advanced question is just taking a litany of rules and applying them all to one question at different points in time in that question. So remember, a difficult or advanced question doesn't just become difficult advanced for no good reason. All right. The other thing, careless mistakes. This is something that is more about the test itself. You got to eliminate them. They're going to happen early. They're going to happen often. You have to know when you're doing them, why you're doing them. And if you can figure that out, you'll be in a great spot when you get to your GMAT, because hopefully whatever you were doing to cause yourself to make those careless mistakes, those will start going away over time. That's the goal. So just keep that in the back of your mind, and that way moving forward, it shouldn't be, a huge issue for you when you get to the test. But it can be killer on the test. The more careless mistakes you have, obviously, the more your quant score will suffer. So the key is understanding when you're doing those, why you're doing them, and make fixes. All right, let me just see if there's any other questions. We finished our quant section 3 to 4 minutes earlier. Well, the ChatGPT thing, yeah, harder questions, I think you're probably not going to get correct responses. Correct. That's why I don't suggest using it. Let's see. Someone says there's another question that was unanswered. Okay, I'm with TTP, 25% completed. I think if you complete 100% of TTP, you can get any score you want. I don't think there's a limit to that. I think you just have the key for you is not just finishing 100%, but doing it the right way, like getting through the material to a point where you actually understand it. If you're just checking boxes just to get through it, then yeah, that's going to be a problem for you. But yeah, if you really do the course the way it's laid out, I think any score is possible. Okay, so if we finish our quant section with 3 to 4 minutes and haven't marked any questions for review, how should we utilize the extra time? I mean, my short answer is don't allow that to be the case. Don't finish the test with 3 to 4 minutes early. You got to be better in the moment to know that you have that extra time. So if you get stuck on a question, let's say, you use that time strategically to get yourself unstuck. But yeah, I mean, besides randomly looking back at questions, there's nothing, there's nothing I could say because I don't know what questions maybe in the back of your mind you feel like you maybe rush through a little bit to go back and look for. But try your best to not make this, your reality on the test. The best thing you can do, I'm not saying you have to finish exactly on time, but really take advantage of that 3 to 4 minutes that you could have used earlier on in the test. All right. Get back in here. All right, this is huge, and this is always the case. You start studying for the GMAT, you're like, I'll do it in 4 months, I'll do it in 3 months, and then all of a sudden it's 6 months. So what does that mean? It means you can't start your prep 3 months before applications are due. And remember, it's not just getting the GMAT and saying your apps are done. That would be doing the GMAT and doing your apps. And that's a lot of work, probably too much work than you actually want to deal with. So give yourself more time than you need, plus an extra 2 months. If you think it take you 4 months, give yourself 6 to then 8 months. Just do it early. There's no point in saving this. And even if you know you're not going to apply for a couple of years, but your GMAT won't expire, do it now. Do it while life is simpler and you have less stuff going on. That's always going to be the case. It should always be the goal, because who wants to try to incorporate GMAT studying when things are even more crazy and complicated in their life? This is obvious. Keep your stress low and well-being high. Well, yeah, I mean, do it. It's, I'm not going to say that studying for the GMAT is not stressful and that some of the things you do for your well-being may have to be somewhat pushed aside. If you're someone who works out 5 days a week or goes to the gym 5 days a week, you may have to go 3 days because you got to study for the GMAT too, right? Not saying lock yourself in a hole or a cave or a closet or whatever and just study for the GMAT because that's not helpful. But find the balance, even though it's going to have to skew GMAT maybe more than you're used to, but with the understanding that, hey, it's a finite process. It's going to end at some point. And if you can understand that, you'll be in good shape. And then, yeah, reaching out for help, that's important. If you feel like things aren't going the right way, reach out to help, whether it's on GMAT Club or through colleagues or friends or family members, people who went to business school or took the GMAT. Reach out to them, or professionals. People reach out to us at TTP all the time, right? For a variety of help, whether it's with the self-study course, whether they want to set up private tutoring, whatever it is, just make sure you are reaching out for that help. Now, this is big, your why, because you're going to have those bad days. And when you do, you got to say to yourself, why am I doing this in the first place? But you're doing it to get a great GMAT score, to great business school, to get a great job, and to have a career trajectory that you're happy with, right? Well, that's exactly it. And that's the stuff that has to be going through your head on those bad days when you don't feel like dealing with the GMAT, right? And that's where discipline comes in, because motivation may be lacking certain days. But if you've created that study schedule and you have that study plan that we talked about, you're going to study regardless of how you're feeling, regardless of what happened at work or at home or whatever it is, you're still going to put in the time. Might not be a great study day, but it'll be a study day nonetheless. And that's very, very, very important that you're doing those things and, you're in a position where you're always putting in that time. And it doesn't mean that some days you don't have to study. You can give yourself cheat days. You can reward yourself for great studying. So all of that is possible, but just make sure you stay incredibly disciplined. All right, grit. Well, we kind of talked about this already. It just means you're going to do whatever is necessary to get to where you need to be with this GMAT Quant. Just persevere. Don't let the bad days push you back too far. It's okay if they do to a degree, but it can't allow you to quit the GMAT altogether. You always have to keep moving forward. And yes, set goals, commit to those goals, make sure that you're in a position where, you're following through with them. And you can have mini goals. At the end of this week, I'm going to have a number of properties complete and the TTP course and all the chapter tests done. Stick to that goal, right? And it doesn't mean things can't be malleable. If you have a timeline for your GMAT and you're working hard and it has to be slightly pushed, that shouldn't be a huge deal. So, keep that in mind as well. Growth mindset, we talked about this already. It's really just the idea of understanding that you can grow and you will grow. Where you're starting day one is not where you will necessarily be day 90. And if you can go into the process with that growth mindset, with the understanding that you're going to grow and you're going to get better, then you're set. This is not just a GMAT thing. This is in life too. We always want to grow. We always want to improve as professionals, as people, right? Why not the same thing on the GMAT itself, right? Atomic habits. Well, atomic habits are things that you're doing every day without fail, right? Now, I feel like, we talk about studying and making sure you're putting in that study time and being disciplined. Some days are going to feel better or worse than others, right? But if you can ensure that these atomic habits are built in, you're doing them every day, you're making incremental improvements with your GMAT prep, that's going to get you to the finish line. The days where you're doing nothing, the days where you're going in reverse, which aren't planned, are the days that are going to be hurting you more. So just be in a position where, you are dealing with atomic habits. And again, this isn't just a GMAT thing. It's also a life thing as well. All right, this is important. And before I get into it, let me just see if there's any questions. All right, comparing yourself with others. Unfortunately, this happens. We're online, we're on GMAT Club, we know colleagues are taking the GMAT. So we say, well, why did they do it in this amount of time? Why am I doing it in that amount of time? That's an issue because at the end of the day, you just want to get your GMAT score and get into the right school. You can't worry about what person to the left of you is doing, what the person to the right of you is doing. It's your path. It's unique. It's going to take you the amount of time it's going to take you. And that's just that. And that's all you can focus on. Because if you're focusing on what other people are doing, it's going to take away from what you're doing in the moment. And it's going to take away from your ability to get from the beginning to the end as efficiently as possible, because you're going to waste days and thoughts thinking about what everyone else around you is doing. So just don't. You can get advice from people. You can figure out what they're doing and what their paths look like. You can even in a way compare it to what you've been doing, but just don't let that bog you down with your attitude towards this whole process, because everyone can be equally as successful with doing this thing in different amounts of time. So just remember that. Now, specific study tips, which we talked about. Foundations, walk before you run. That's simple, right? Don't jump into the hardest stuff you'll possibly ever see before doing the easier foundational stuff. Easy and medium questions, yeah, they're important, right? You want to know those. It's not just jumping into the hard questions. You got to be good with the easy and the medium questions to get to the hard questions, right? But that's something that should be obvious. Hopefully the study plan you select, like TTP, for example, will allow you to get to that point. That's going to be really, really important. Now, careless mistakes, we want to get rid of them. Focus on accuracy to start. Yes, you need to be fast at a certain point, but you don't just become fast out of the blue. So you become accurate, you get your processes down, you recognize what's being asked, you execute a plan. That's going to make you fast. You're not just going to become fast randomly. That's not how it works, right? So when you're first learning a topic, as much as you want to be fast, make sure you're taking your time and doing things the right way. Okay. Don't rush when you first start your GMAT Quant prep. I'm telling you, it's only going to hurt. It's not going to help you. Algebra, it's key. It's going to have a huge impact on quant across the board. Learn it early, learn it well, and be able to do it like the back of your hand. If you can do that, you'll be set for a lot of reasons. But it can't be something that you learn later on in your prep. It needs to happen early and often in your prep to a point where when you see it in the form of a word problem, the algebra component is very simple. As far as your resources, use great detailed resources. The thing that we pride ourselves on at TTP is that our resources are very detailed because those are needed for success on the GMAT, right? You need detailed stuff because it's a detailed test. It doesn't ask a lot of questions, but it's based on a lot of different stuff that you can see that can be asked. And so it's important that whatever resources you're learning, reflect that type of detail. That's going to be really, really important for you. Error logs, use them, but be careful. You don't want your error log to balloon up to 2,000 questions. Don't let the error log take control. That's what that means. It needs to be well maintained, right? So use your error log. Get rid of the stuff that you start understanding. You don't need the stuff from day 10 in your error log and day 110 if you already know it. Because what will happen is your error log will get so big, it'll overconsume the prep materials you're even using, and it'll take days to get through it. That's not the point of it. It's to get nuggets of knowledge and data of what's going wrong, why it's going wrong, and in what circumstances. But once you've rectified a lot of those things, get them out of there because new stuff will be coming in. So yeah, one of the biggest things that people forget is the maintenance of their error logs. All right, if you think you're bad at math, remove that from your thought, your vocabulary, whatever you want to say. No one is just strictly bad at math. You may have less experience in math, right? You may have less of a math type job or career. It doesn't mean you're bad at it. It just means you're going to have to work a little harder to learn it. So don't go into this test saying you're bad at math, because if you have thoughts like that, that's going to become your reality, and it's going to be hard to escape that, as you move forward. Go into it saying, well, I haven't seen this stuff in about 10 years, so I'm going to have to put in a significant amount of effort to learn it. To me, that's totally fine. That's the way you want to be thinking about it. And that's how you're going to improve. And that's growth mindset. That's atomic habits. That's all the stuff we talked to. But the bare minimum bottom line is don't come into it saying you're bad at math. Use other words or thoughts about just being out of the math loop for a period of time, but it doesn't mean you're not going to get better and improve. All right, so these are just some students who've done great on the GMAT. I'm sure you guys have seen these people in GMAT Club, 735, 755. We've had some 100th percentile scorers here with great math scores, 645, 715. So I'm sure you guys know a lot about how some of the students at TTP have performed. We'd love for you to be one of them. Now, we also have something we launched pretty recently, which is amazing. It's our on-demand course, which actually takes our self-study course and applies lecture-style videos that Scott is teaching on a smartboard. It's been a great addition to our course. Students have loved it. They've enjoyed learning from him. He gives his thoughts. He gives his insights. So everything that is in Scott's head that went into making the course is now shining in these videos. We offer separate office hours for people taking the on-demand course. It's pretty amazing. You can check that out. You can get a trial to it. And of course, we've got a spring sale coming here. You can use this code SPRING15 to get 15% off any of our plans. Self-study, live teach, on demand, etc. So make sure to take advantage of that. You'll probably get that, through the GMAT Club newsletter. You'll probably see that, and you'll see it advertised on GMAT Club. And remember, we have a 5-day trial, so anything we offer, you can check out in 5 days for sure to make sure that you feel good about the course. All right. Well, if we don't have any other questions, then appreciate everybody participating, spending some time listening to what I had to say. I hope you guys picked up some good tips for getting a great GMAT Quant score, and I look forward to seeing you guys all again and talking about some more GMAT stuff in the future. So thanks for coming, everybody, and we will talk soon.